There are many American poets that are household names, meaning that the majority of households know the name of a poet and can name a few poems even. Robert Frost is definitely one of these, and his poem, The Road Not Taken, is known virtually across the country. I remember when I was in 4th grade, my teacher placed the poem in front of me, and we read it as a class. As a class, we decided that each and every one of us should take the road less traveled, and that if we live a life true to our unique selves, then it will surely lead to a good place. Fast forward a few years, I was in 6th grade, and once again the road not taken was placed in front of me to examine as a class. It was the same thing as last time. The obvious choice was the road less traveled by. It made all the difference, right? So that difference had to be the key to successful and fulfilling life. Fast forward a few more years, and I was in 9th grade, and yet again, the road not taken was given to me to examine with my class. My teacher was taking us through the motions. I was baffled that we were still analyzing the same boring poem after all these years, considering that I understood the message and followed it to the best of my ability since I had been 11. The class, once again, agreed on the same message, that we had all been told our entire lives, when my teacher brought up something I had never thought about before. She said, grinning, "What if Frost is unsure of his decision?" This one comment absolutely blew my mind. I had never even thought about that before. My entire life I was told and interpreted the road not taken a certain way. But once I heard the idea presented by my 9th grade teacher, the entire poem made more sense, but in a completely different way. I could never see it the way I had originally seen it. Instead, I saw a much more insecure man talking about a prominent struggle in his life, instead of the anthem of independence that the majority of people construe it as. Scholar Jeff Frank said in his essay, Love and Ruin, Robert Frost on Moral Repair. He states, Frost poetry is built on a belief in the inevitability of destruction, decline, and loss, although it may have taken a while for readers to fully appreciate that Frost is not an optimistic writer of country ideals. Basically, Frost poetry has double meanings, and for a very long time, people misinterpreted what he was actually trying to say. And now, upon reflection, there's alternate meanings and a lot of times deeper meanings that you can gather from Frost poetry. Frost might be one of the most famous American poets, but he's also one of the most misunderstood poets of all time. His poetry is seemingly innocent, but almost always has some sort of deeper message or alternate meaning. Another poem, called After Apple Picking, also operates on a deeper meaning. On the surface, After Apple Picking presents a man that is working tirelessly to pick apples during the harvest. However, upon further analysis, it depicts a man preparing for death and coming to terms with his death looming near. This idea of passing is immediately put in the reader's mind when Frost brings up the afterlife. He states, "My long two-pointed ladder's sticking through a tree, toward heaven still." Frost continuously goes back to the motif of sleep and fatigue. Sleep is symbolic of the speaker's death, as the speaker comes to term with his death looming near. Robert Stilling, a scholar with a doctorate in English from the University of Virginia, comments on Frost's poetry in his essay Between Friends, Rediscovering the War Thoughts of Robert Frost. By writing, any poet knows that sometimes two roads diverge on the page and the road taken goes nowhere, an obvious reference to death. Another interlaced meaning in Frost poetry can be seen in his poem Home Burial, which depicts a husband and wife arguing about the death of their newborn son. The wife is afraid to discuss her emotions, and the husband is angry with her for not discussing her emotions, and this disconnect of communication is what ultimately leads to their fighting, as opposed to the son's death. The son's death is acting as a catalyst towards their miscommunication, and the miscommunication is actually what Frost is commenting on in the poem. In both of these poems, there are multiple ways of interpretation. However, it is interesting how the more pessimistic and intended meaning goes over the head of so many readers. When you change your perspective and read Frost poetry in a different light, you might actually learn something about Frost, and you might actually learn something about yourself.